Gotta do what I gotta do.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to episode 2 of the MMA Rundown. We've got a pretty long show this week. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on. Obviously, UFC 209 just concluded on Saturday night. We've got UFC Fight Night 106 coming up, and there have been a few other topics that have come up over the week that are going to be of interest to talk about. Most notably would be Dana White's comments on fighters asking for money fights, whether I agree with him, whether I disagree with him. There's a lot to kind of delve into on that, but we're going to get started right now with the UFC 209 fight card. So for the main fights, I'll go in depth with them on their own segments, but to start off with, I'll just kind of go bottom to top on the card, starting from the Fight Pass prelims all the way to the top. Just kind of going through the results and then sort of making comments if need be. So the first fight of the night was Albert Morales versus Andre Sukumtat. Pretty good fight. Albert Morales looked really good out there. Sukumtat obviously was making his debut. Also came in on late notice. Was kind of more worried about just making way for the camp than kind of working on a strategy. Looked good in a round there, but again, it ended up being a split decision. It shouldn't have been a split decision. It was a pretty clear 2-1 for Albert Morales. Good win for him. It'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. He's a relatively inexperienced fighter. He started around 2013, so for him to be not only in the UFC by now, but to have a few fights in the UFC, he's improving fast. It's going to be interesting to see how much he keeps improving and where he can go from here, but it's definitely a good sign for him to get a win. Tyson Pedro and Paul Craig, this was definitely a big fight. You had two guys who were both highly touted prospects. Paul Craig, very popular out in Scotland. Tyson Pedro, having been around the sport for a while now, he's finally getting a start in the sport, and he's doing really well with it. He won by first round TKO. Very impressive job by him. Really good with the knees. Really good once he got on top. Able to control position, work himself into a good crucifix, and keep landing elbows until the ref stepped in. I didn't have any issues with the stoppage. I don't think Paul Craig had any issues with the stoppage. Seemed a little bit early, but it wasn't going anywhere good for Craig. So good to see that he didn't take any more damage than he needed to. Next fight was Mark Godbeer versus Daniel Spitz, in what was just not a fight worth watching. Very boring. Both guys tired out pretty quickly, and once they had both sort of gassed, it went downhill. It's one of those things where obviously this is the fight game. This is Vegas. You're gonna have to have heavyweights and fights in Vegas, but sometimes when you have these heavyweights, you don't have the best cardio, and you're putting them up at elevation, like a place like Vegas, Mexico City. Obviously, there was that card a while back that didn't go terribly well with all the heavyweights up there. This is a risk you take, and obviously, it didn't pay off in this case. Not a whole lot more to touch on that one. Yuri Alcantara versus Luke Sanders. Sanders looked spectacular. He looked really good. Like I had said in last week's show, Alcantara is a guy who is very skilled pretty much everywhere. Pretty good striker, very good jiu-jitsu. He was a guy who looked like he had a lot of promise coming up and kind of sort of faded into the top 15. Luke Sanders looked spectacular against him. Obviously, he didn't get the win, but for the majority of the fight, he was winning. Alcantara caught him in a knee bar. Sanders was smart to tap before he took too much damage. He'll be fine. Hopefully he gets back at it soon. I'd like to see him fight against another top 15 opponent because he looked fantastic. I'd like to see how far he can go. Eventually there may be a rematch with this fight depending on how well Sanders does, and he might have a chance to get that win back. Speaking of getting wins back, Mirsad Bektic and Darren Elkins. That was a very, very brutal fight to watch. Bektic, for the first couple of rounds, was doing to Elkins what Elkins generally does to other people, except probably in a more brutal fashion as far as getting them down, holding them down, beating them up on the ground. But man, Elkins is so tough. And for Bektic, I don't know whether he was tired towards the end, what exactly happened, but Elkins got a good position on him, landed a couple hard shots, and Bektic just went down hard. Huge win for Elkins. Took a lot of damage, so I wouldn't expect to see him back right away. Bektic, you'd probably figure after a knockout like that, he probably won't be back right away. And it's a tough fight to see where each of them go from there. Elkins, yeah, I mean, he's still going to be kind of top 15. You could probably put him up against a guy who's close to the top 10 as far as Bektic goes. He was a guy who was being looked at prior to this fight as a huge up-and-coming star, a big riser. For him to do what he did to Elkins in the first couple of rounds, in a way that sort of confirms the potential he has, but obviously you got to finish the fight. You got to, or even as far as finish the fight, you don't necessarily have to put him away, but you have to be able to finish your 3 rounds and not have the sort of lapse that he had in the third round where he got caught. For him, I'd like to see him against another top 15 guy. I think he still does have a lot of potential, but it's tough for him to go out that way, and it's tough for him to have a fight where he was so dominant and with him losing in such spectacular fashion. And then the final fight on the undercard was Marcin Tybura versus Luis Henrique, another heavyweight fight that just got really boring. It was kind of frustrating to see Henrique, a guy who was looking to use his jiu-jitsu, but a lot of times when he would get Tybura down, he had some decent shots from the center of the octagon, but once he got up against the cage, he really wasn't changing levels. Wasn't doing a whole lot. He was just kind of like holding him up against the fence for long periods of time. It looked like he was catching his breath a lot of that time, but you'd like to see someone whose game plan is to get someone down, have a more diverse takedown arsenal, and one that he's actually effective in using, and that wasn't the case for him. Onto the main card, Alistair Overeem defeated Mark Hunt with a pretty brutal knockout in the third round. We'll go over that one separately. Cynthia Calvillo beat Amanda Cooper by rear naked choke. Very, very good grappling exchanges. Once she got the takedown, it was just a lot of good work from her. Ended up reversing Amanda Cooper when Cooper went for a double on her, went for an anaconda choke, and just by some feat of flexibility was able to take her back off of a failed anaconda attempt. And once she had her back, she was able to eventually sneak in the rear naked choke, get the finish, and get her first UFC win in an impressive fashion. Dan Kelly versus Rashad Evans. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this fight. Dan Kelly just kind of has the zombie aspect to him. Rashad in the past, a lot of times in his losses, the same thing can always be said, where it's like he'd only throw one shot. He was unwilling to pull the trigger. That was definitely the case in this one as well. A lot of times he was coming in with one shot when Kelly would come in with 2 or 3, and then ultimately that's what decided this fight. Some very interesting grappling exchanges. I was pretty impressed by Rashad's ability to avoid some of the throws and trips that Kelly was throwing, because Kelly was fitting in deep really on a lot of those. Rashad was also able to get Kelly down a couple times, but Kelly was good at just kind of turtling up and then working his way back up. So, impressive fight for Kelly. I don't know where he goes from here. Obviously, he's got some really bad knee issues. If he wants to get to the top level, you'd figure he'd have to take the time off to get that repaired, but he's also getting up there in age. But, I mean, next time he fights, obviously, I'm going to want to see it. He's not the prettiest fighter, but, man, he gets it done, and it's interesting to watch for sure. David Tamer defeated Lando Venata by unanimous decision. That fight was easily the fight of the night. There was no question on that one. Just both guys landed some serious shots that you'd figure would finish a lot of other guys, and they were just kind of eating them like it was nothing, especially Lando Venata eating a lot of the body shots. I was really impressed by his ability to do that. Tamer was also landing a lot of good hard shots to the head. Again, Venata ate them. For Lando, he's sort of beginning to look like the next version of Joe Lozon in a way, where he's a guy who can hang with the top guys. He's not winning all the time, but man, those fights are fun. Obviously, now he's had 3 fights in the UFC. All 3 he's gotten bonuses for. Fight with Tony Ferguson, he almost finished Tony. That was an exciting fight. Obviously, he did finish John McDussie with the spinning back kick and had a lot of good moments here against Tamer. It was an interesting matchup because Tamer is a better pure striker than Venata, and I had imagined coming in that Venata would probably use his wrestling a little bit more. He had a couple takedowns, but wasn't able to keep Tamer down, and then Tamer started taking him down late in the fight, which I found to be pretty surprising. So, in the future, it'd be interesting to see if Venata gets another fight like this where it's against a superior striker, if he tries to kind of use his grappling, or if he decides, hey, I'll stand with him. I can stand with anyone. I've got a good shot at him. I can land a lot of good shots and see where it goes. As a fan, I don't mind that strategy, but if his concern is long-term health and working his way to the title, he's probably going to have to try to fight a little bit smarter. And then in the main event, Tyron Woodley was given the decision against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. One judge had it as a 47-47 draw. The other 2 had it 48-47 Woodley. The big round of contention would be the second round. In the first and second, there wasn't a whole ton that happened in either of them, but it's one of those things where if you're going to say 10-10, I get that. If you're going to say slight 10-9 to Wonderboy, again, he was controlling the center. He was landing a few shots. But to give both of them, obviously the first wasn't given to Woodley, but to give the second to Woodley, I kind of see a problem with that. I'll have to go back and watch that fight again, but on first glance, that didn't look like the round was deserved by Woodley. But again, I'll get into that one in depth, and we'll discuss a lot of other things going on with the welterweight picture now that Tyron Woodley has defeated Stephen Wonderboy Thompson.